Welcome back. Today we are going to be looking at an article from the Dailymail website concerning millennials and the workforce. As it is the Dailymail, we have two problems to look at. The first being whether or not the article is correct in assuming that the current crop of new workers, i.e. the millennial workforce, are snowflakes and or entitled, and also whether or not the article is fair considering the employment that those that are mentioned in the article are doing. The work-shy teacher who has a taste of what's to come when the snowflake generation runs Britain. Some 80 years ago, the American government produced a pamphlet encouraging people into work. It explained that being idle was just about the worst thing imaginable, because it meant the loss of self-respect, pride and hope. By contrast, it went on, let's look at what work does for us. Work keeps us from going nuts. I sometimes wonder what would happen if our government distributed such a pamphlet today. It would cause moral hysteria. People saying that you're trying to shame the unemployed, shame those that choose not to work. There are so many different types of shaming these days. This one would not surprise me at all. If you are unable to work, then you are exempt from this criticism. But if you are able to work and choose not to work, then I have every right to rail on you. Why should my taxpayer money elevate you? Why should my taxpayer money sustain you when you are not doing anything to contribute towards society? How long would it take for people to demand an apology? About a day, and I'm sure there would be a massive change.org petition. For one thing, there is that incendiary world nuts. That was misspelt, I'm sure. Which would have mental health campaigners steaming with outrage, yes, and the easily offended. You might wonder what on earth is wrong with hard work. Absolutely nothing. What's so bad about putting in the hours, knuckling down and getting something done? Just ask Eddie Ledsham. For as the Mail reported yesterday, the 22-year-old has just left the teaching profession after being unable to cope with what he considered as a nightmarishly back-breaking workload. I have a strange feeling you and I should switch professions. I do manual labour. It is rather taxing. As he admitted in an online video, he had been warned by his tutors that his first year in the job, teaching 8-year-olds at a school on the Wirral, would be tough. I guess in this instance he's not just contending with 8-year-olds, he's contending with people from the Wirral. I think Otterface is from there. I have a number of friends that are teachers, and all confided in me that, and I did this before I started recording, that yes, the first year was hard, but it doesn't get any easier. It becomes more manageable. Quitting because of a workload is ridiculous. If you're looking for an easy route in life, might I suggest breaking a few ankles and claiming you'll never be able to work properly, and then sneaking about falsely claiming benefits for a disability you don't have, or perhaps instead mooch off your parents. As he explained, he had so much to do that he found himself thinking about it on the train to and from work. That's generally how work and responsibilities go. Teaching is a profession that you should be proud to be a part of. It's a career choice. It is an honour. It is your job to make sure that the children that are under your tutelage understand what you're telling them. It is your job to help them so they can progress. That is a responsibility in and of itself, and if you're lucky, some of them will amount to something. For the sake of this, I'm going to play the video because they link it in this article.
So I decided I wanted to be a teacher when I was in year 10. I went to university for 3 years and did all the training. What I found that we weren't taught was how difficult it would actually be when we started. I taught for 5 months in a school that only had one class per year, which I found particularly hard, considering I didn't have the support of another teacher in my year to share planning and resources with. I've also found that teaching as a profession is no longer about passing on knowledge, but rather teaching children how to pass tests. I had probably the best class imaginable, but found the sheer time constraints it had on my day-to-day life and my emotional and psychological well-being just too hard in the long run.
All of this makes you look incredibly sensitive, delicate. Teachers long before you were a teacher had this. And I know this because I remember my own tutors telling me this. Think about this. If you had issues with 8-year-olds, imagine the workload of a secondary school teacher. Schools are supposedly more free, but they're not. They're more restrictive for teachers than they ever were, which is why more teachers are leaving the workforce, because they can't handle it. And that sucks, that really does. But much like any profession, we work to standards, we work to targets. If you're unable to do that, then you clearly aren't destined to be a member of the workforce. Nearly every profession has a target. KPIs, as they're called. I remember when I was 11, my brand new form tutor in year 7, she had just started teaching, and I remember her telling me on multiple occasions that she'd spend hours after work marking things, and not just stuff from her lessons, sometimes exam papers. It is a small price to pay to do something you wanted to do, and if it means you don't get to spend as much time with other people, then so be it. Anyway, let's continue with this article. When I first read the story, I wondered if Mr. Ledgesham was being serious, but he appears to be genuinely shocked that he sometimes had to work after watching the football. Still, Mr. Ledgesham is only 22, perhaps he can be excused a little naivety, but I think his story is part of a bigger trend reflecting the values of a generation who have been taught to shun the world rather than to embrace it, and seeing themselves as victims rather than as doers, which I think, if people are quitting so easily, would indeed be true. If more young people are quitting more complicated jobs, then I would agree. As this is an individual case, I'm not inclined to agree just yet. You have probably read about the emergence of a snowflake generation in our universities. Yes, I am all too aware of that. Who take offence at the slightest provocation, demand trigger warnings before classes, and campaign to have supposedly racist statues torn down. Yes, they want to erase the past so that we are open to making the same mistakes again. And you left out safe spaces. But these students have not sprung into life from nowhere. They are the products of a wider culture of self-indulgent victimhood, not just in our schools but in millions of homes, something which we can't truly police, let's face it, and nor would I ever encourage it. And now of course they are growing up. They are not just school children with scrubbed faces or students suffused with moral indignation. They are moral outrage incarnate. They are now becoming parents themselves, passing on their sense of entitlement to the next generation, which is interesting because I've noticed it's a weird every generation seems to rebel against their parents. So I'm wondering how this current crop of parents will handle when their children grow up and rebel against them. Let's not forget, a lot of parents who let their children get away with being members of Antifa are fairly rich and don't really pay attention to it. They just give them their pocket money and then leave them to it. And if you doubt it, consider another story this week. It concerns parents in East Sussex, thankfully not West Sussex, who were infuriated by a council campaign to cut down on poor school attendance. I fully support it, by the way. And I'm a SWAT, I had a near 100% attendance record for the 5 years I was in secondary school. I literally only took 2 days off because I was in hospital. Under the heading Get a Grip, the council warned parents that there were no good reasons for missing school apart from a genuine medical condition, which is absolutely almost true. I would argue family bereavement, potentially. If children had a headache or cold, the council said they should still go to school. They should. There's medication they can take, adding that your child is still able to go to school when they feel tired. And it offered tips for parents on being more organised, from getting breakfast ready to setting an early morning alarm. We do this as adults, so it's always good to instill this in children. And there is a small video to accompany this.
Holidays? Appointments? A bit of a cold? Get a grip. There's no excuse for missing school. Find out more at eastsussex.gov.uk/getagrip.
I honestly thought it might be a joke. When one child gets ill, if the parent, I think actually, sensibly thinks, oh, let's not send you to school today because you're not well, you're not going to have a good day because you're going to be miserable anyway, then you're not going to infect anyone else as well.
Personally, I think the council should be applauded for laying down the law. I am the law. Parents who keep their children at home because they are looking a bit tired are doing them a gross disservice. Life is about coping with setbacks and annoyances. It is about keeping going when you feel ropey. Life is work. If you stop, what do? You just hang out with your friends. Is that what life is to you? That's indulgent, that's pointless. Life has to have some kind of purpose. If you think your purpose is to quit something that actually could have meant something, then I guess you're not really worth anyone's time. Yet some parents see things differently. A mother from Seaford even set up an online petition, of course she did, demanding the council scrap the Get a Grip campaign. In her own words, she and her comrades, appropriate, were not merely shocked, they felt blindly attacked and undermined. It's not that. It's that this generation is so entitled. Clearly they're getting away with a lot of crap at home. Everyone else has to set standards, be professional. We have to encourage children to want to succeed. They're not going to want to succeed if they know they can live off you for life. And in classic Snowflake style, the petition demands the council make a public apology. The council shouldn't make an apology at all. I think the council should double down on this. By now, there can be no institution in the land that has not been asked to make a public apology for something or other. For the campaigning classes, an apology, however insincere, is the holy grail. Yeah, and then what? A lot of groups that do this, they want the apologies. It's not enough for them. They want more. They want people to lose their jobs. They want people to be publicly shamed. They want the that woman in Game of Thrones who had to walk through the streets naked, while everyone else was shouting shame at her. They want that. In that supreme Snowflake newsletter, The Guardian, yep, somebody demands an apology for something almost every day. Oddly enough, that is true. It actually is true. Britain once led the world in making things. We now lead the world in making apologies. It is very British. I always thought it was a Canadian thing to say sorry, but it turns out it's very British, and it's quite sad. Sorry about that. All this is the product of a culture that shrinks from challenges, disdains hard work, and tries to wish away the harsher realities of life, which I think is absolutely true. And I'm starting now to believe that I'm starting to believe this person. They're very good at persuading people, aren't they? No, I'm kidding. The instances aren't indicative of a trend. They just indicate instances. Yes. It has, I suppose, become a bit of a cliche to moan about the all-must-have prize culture of today's schools, and yet only last month it emerged that Highgate School in North London had indeed abolished its annual prize-giving ceremony. According to the head of its lower school, Stuart Evans, it was not right for pupils who were not prize winners to sit through the event where prize winners are being singled out. Do you know what the point of a competition is? And this is something that motivates me when I work. I want to be better than anyone else. Fact. When you go for a competition, you want to win. And it's not just to rub it in everyone else's faces, because let's face it, that is a massive perk. It's because you know you're better. In that instance, you are victorious. And you should be lauded. You should be celebrated. And everyone else should be graceful. They should learn to understand defeat. We don't always go through life winning, but when we do win, we deserve to. We deserve to celebrate. You don't take it away from people because you don't want to hurt Mathieson feels. I think we're done with this. This article is rather irritating. As far as I'm concerned, to the individuals mentioned in this, to the former teacher, who is now, I assume, on job seekers allowance or universal credits, you were clearly never meant to be a teacher. You were never meant to have the privilege or the honour of imparting knowledge upon the next generation that will be better than anything you could have been, because they're not going to be as entitled as you. And as far as the Get a Grip campaign goes, I fully support it. I used to go in with migraines every single day, and I got straight A's. If I was a little more arrogant, like no bullshit arrogant, I'd probably start telling everyone that I went to college, and I had a pretty good attendance record there too. Thank you all for listening.
Moist.